following is a special broadcast from ABC News.
The situation inside Kuwait is serious. They have occupied...
It was just over a year ago that Saddam Hussein's army stormed into Kuwait. George Bush responded this way.
We call for the immediate and unconditional withdrawal of all the Iraqi forces. There is no place for this sort of naked aggression in today's world.
The U.S. military deployment to the Gulf was the largest since Vietnam. Operation Desert Shield, to protect Saudi Arabia, to protect the oil. The Iraqi leader was defiant, ignoring sanctions, taking hostages, refusing to leave Kuwait. On January the 17th, the Allies struck. Desert Shield became Desert Storm.
The liberation of Kuwait has begun.
First, there were weeks of relentless pounding from the air. The Iraqis struck back with Scuds into Israel and Saudi Arabia. Then the U.S.-led alliance attacked by land. A 100-hour ground war. The Iraqi soldiers surrendered in the tens of thousands.
As far as Saddam Hussein being a great military strategist, he is neither a strategist, nor is he schooled in the operational art, nor is he a tactician, nor is he a general, nor is he as a soldier. Other than that, he's a great military man, don't you know?
Kuwait was liberated. The conquerors returned home triumphant. But tonight, Saddam Hussein is still in power, and the Middle East is still on fire. A year ago, President Bush drew a line in the sand. But what did America win? Good evening. You remember the Gulf War, an overwhelming American victory. The power of American technology and planning so superior that virtually everywhere on this battlefield, the Iraqi army and certainly the Iraqi Air Force chose not to fight. From the edge of Kuwait City deep into the Iraqi heartland, the U.S.-led coalition was so dominant that the outcome, at least for commanders on the battlefield, was never in doubt. There are some U.S. forces still out here. But in the few short months since Operation Desert Storm came to an end, other priorities have pushed the war and the challenges still out here into the shadows for most Americans. For one thing, there's been a revolution up there in the Soviet Union. But do you remember how much expectation the war created? Saddam Hussein would become a nobody. The Arabs and Israelis would see the futility of war and finally agree to negotiate their differences peacefully. The American hostages would be released. Certainly the Middle East wouldn't need to be choking any longer on all those weapons. America's defense of Saudi Arabia, the liberation of Kuwait, the suffocation of dictatorship in Iraq, it would all herald a new order. And inspired by American example, democracy would begin to flourish. Well, hold on. There hasn't been that much change in Saudi Arabia. As we'll see in detail in this hour, the U.S. has liberated the Kuwaitis from Iraq, but democracy in Kuwait is as much a mirage as it has been for years, and Saddam Hussein is still in power. We're going to begin tonight with one small example of how the war didn't completely teach Hussein the lesson which so many others had intended. Just west of Baghdad here, there is a place called Fallujah. In the late days of June, an international arms inspection team, with the apparent agreement of the Iraqi government, came to Fallujah, where satellite photos had indicated the Iraqis were trying to conceal elements of their secret nuclear weapons program. They made a home video of their visit. Until tonight, it has only been seen by the UN Security Council. Talk about frustration. Take a look.
This is the entrance gate at Fallujah, or Al-Haswa, as designated by the Iraqis.
The voice you hear on the tape is that of Jay Davis, a nuclear physicist from California. He's the one using the video camera. The man in the blue hat is David Kay, the International Atomic Energy Agency's chief inspector on this mission.
We have two team members climbing to the top of the water tower to get a view over the site. And we've just been informed that if they fall, it's their responsibility, and I fully agree.
At first, the Iraqis seem to be cooperative, but then the team on the tower sees something.
There must be a back exit. They're all going out to the major equipment is being moved from the base in violation.
The UN team believes that the trucks they see from the water tower are carrying equipment to enrich uranium. They think the trucks are going out the back entrance to avoid their inspection.
But I must request that you inform the commander of the seriousness of vehicle movement on this site. A clear Security Council resolution has now been violated by the government of Iraq.
The Iraqis become uncooperative. So 2 members of the UN team leave the main group to go to the back entrance.
Go get him, Kiwi! Go get him, boy! Tim Sopp and Richard Lally are headed around the edge of the compound to see if they can cut off the Iraqi trucks as they leave.
The captain should understand that our photo reconnaissance capability is such that I can tell you the drivers color their mustache.
While the UN inspectors are waiting at the main gate, other Iraqi trucks try to leave.
We have another vehicle trying to exit the gate. I'll see if I can get some sense of, yes, there was a long line behind it. This was a convoy of perhaps 10, which we have not turned. Folks, this is cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians in the desert.
I must recommend to my commander that the permanent members of the Security Council be immediately informed.
In this day and age, they can call United Nations headquarters in New York from the middle of nowhere.
As we hook up the satellite ground link to talk directly to New York, folks, I couldn't conceivably in the midst of this pass up this shot. This ain't Arizona, Mom.
We arrived on time at the site, delivered a designation, and requested that there be no equipment moved from this site.
No problem. And it is all right to go inside, but he has not received the order.
Colonel, I don't want to go inside to an empty site. I want to go into a site that had the vehicles that I observed and photographed.
While David Kay was arguing with the camp commander, they hear from the team at the back entrance. At the back, they had been taking these pictures of about 100 Iraqi trucks carrying heavy equipment. When shots were fired, no one was injured.
Furthermore, I must strongly protest, and I emphasize strongly, the fact that personnel under my command, clearly marked as UN personnel, came under hostile fire directed by Iraqi forces.
It all lasted about 3 hours.
I received instructions from my authorities to terminate the inspection of this facility at this time.
The UN team never got inside the camp.
It is now in the hands of higher authority. Good day.
When President Bush heard about the fate of this mission, he told the Iraqis if they didn't cooperate, the U.S. might just have to come bombing again. A few days later, David Kay and his UN team were allowed to see the site and the equipment. But then again this week, the Iraqis have dragged their feet, telling the United Nations they cannot fly across Iraqi territory in their own helicopters. Once again, the Security Council is upset. Not long ago, we asked David Kay if they thought they had discovered everything the Iraqis have. He said it's a big country. We'll be back in just a moment.
The spirit of the Olympic Games. It's about being the best you can be. They call him Iron Legs, and he wants to be the best at what he does. But Richard Lowe isn't an Olympic athlete. He's a letter carrier, whose route includes some of the cruelest hills in San Francisco. He climbs them every day, delivering up to 300 pounds of mail. The Postal Service has 750,000 workers like Richard Lowe, who are striving to make it the best there is. In that spirit, we're proud to sponsor the 1992 Olympic Games and share with you the quest to be the best.
First, we created the LS400 luxury sedan. Now we've taken everything we've learned and condensed it. Introducing the Lexus ES300. All the performance of a sports sedan, all the luxury of a Lexus.
Dear Thompsons, I swear by Thompson's water seal. But recently, when it ran out, my son finished with another brand. Then it rained. What a difference. Thompson's beat it up, the other brand nothing. Thanks for a product you can believe in. Marvin Snoddy, Locust Grove, Virginia.
Love her, hold her, and remember our simple formula. At Dean Witter,
We measure success one investor at a time.
In 2 weeks.
Dum, dum, dum.
The story you're about to hear is true.
Dum, dum, dum.
Only the names have been changed to protect the innocent. One's a street-smart ex-cop.
Your private eye picked the lock.
The other, a wisecracking con man.
I almost got killed by a guy who's got name tags in his skivvies.
Their pursuits aren't trivial.
Bill Friday's badge number?
714. What was his partner's name?
The actor or the character?
Both.
The premiere of Frozen Cons 2 weeks from tonight.
I can do all for this trap.
It is useful to remember about the war in the Gulf that while President Bush was careful to say publicly that America's only aim was to get the Iraqis out of Kuwait, he and every other coalition leader looked forward to a victory which would usher in a period of meaningful stability. After all, from the edge of the Mediterranean all the way through Iraq and Iran, down to the tip of the Arabian Peninsula, no other region in the world has been so prone to violence, where there have been so many weapons in so many hands of people so willing to use them. Those same world leaders took pains to point out how good it would be if the regional arms race could be ended. It certainly hasn't worked out that way. As advanced American weaponry is still being withdrawn from the Iraqi battlefield, all sorts of new weapons are finding their way into the arsenals of the Middle East. The biggest arms merchant, as it has always been, the United States. Since the Gulf War ended and George Bush suggested that arms sellers restrain themselves, the United States has already proposed to sell or give over $7 billion worth of advanced weapons to reward America's allies in Operation Desert Storm.
And there are countries, particularly Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Israel, that are interested in increasing their inventory, especially of American arms.
Egypt, whose troops fought with the U.S. in the Gulf War, is expecting $1.6 billion worth of American arms. 46 F-16s, 80 Maverick air-to-air missiles, cluster bombs, and gravity bombs. Saudi Arabia, which feared an Iraqi invasion and still feels insecure, wants to upgrade its air force and is already expecting thousands of cluster bombs, 700 Sparrow air-to-air missiles, and almost $1 billion worth of logistical support.
Clearly, that sale was seen as both a reward to the Saudis for allowing us to come in with 500,000 forces, but also to give the Saudis a sense of reassurance.
The United Arab Emirates are reassuring themselves by spending $682 million for Hellfire missiles and Apache attack helicopters. The list of American weapons going to U.S. allies in the region goes on. Apaches to Bahrain, armored vehicles to Oman, F-16 fighter aircraft to Morocco and Turkey. And Israel, which stood by as Iraqi Scud missiles landed on its territory, is being repaid for its restraint. U.S. money and military expertise to develop an anti-missile system like the Patriot.
The bottom line is that we are under increasing pressure to reward those who stood by us during the war, or in the case of Israel, did not actively intervene in the war.
The Bush administration argues that arms for America's friends contribute to regional stability and guarantee peaceful access to oil.
The danger, of course, is that some of our friends today may not be our friends tomorrow.
Remember, Iran was an American ally at one point, as was Iraq at another. And over the years, U.S. administrations have encouraged arms sales to both. Has anything changed? Yes and no. After the war in the Gulf, the president called for restraint.
We are committed to stopping the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction.
such as nuclear and biological weapons and chemical weapons which Saddam Hussein used against the Kurds. But when the UN Security Council members, the so-called Big Five, the US, the Soviet Union, Britain, France, and China, met in Paris this summer to talk about controlling the weapons flow to the region, they didn't talk much about conventional weapons. The Big Five are the world's biggest sellers of conventional weapons. The Soviet Union's position is made uncertain by the revolution, but selling or trading arms has been good for the Soviet economy. The French government ardently supports its arms industry. In the Gulf War, the French found themselves fighting against their own weapons. They had sold billions of dollars worth to Saddam Hussein. The British do not want to lose market share, aggressively promoting tanks and jet fighters. And now the Chinese are looking for a larger stake, pushing their latest missiles in Syria, Libya, and Iran. The competition among arms sellers is likely to mean that the flow of conventional weapons into the Middle East will continue to be strong and steady. The highly advanced weapons which caused so much destruction in the Gulf War.
Most of the countries that sell arms have dual objectives. What they'd like in an ideal world is to be able to sell arms to their friends and keep everybody else from selling arms to their adversaries.
That's conventional weapons. But as the international arms inspectors try to understand the status of Saddam Hussein's unconventional weapons program, there are reminders of how little Washington can control or even monitor the development of them. Iraq had missiles and it had chemical and biological weapons, and the U.S. knew that. But Washington did not know how close the Iraqis were to building a nuclear bomb.
How did the United States know so little about the Iraqi nuclear capability, or for that matter, its bacteriological or chemical capability?
First, we were winking at many things Iraq did because they were our quote-unquote ally. We didn't want them to lose the war with Iran. And second, most important, we simply didn't devote the intelligence assets to probing every nook and cranny of Iraq, or Iran for that matter, because our priority was the Soviet Union.
The failure in Iraq should tell us that we could be having failures, or we will be having failures elsewhere, and that we actually know less about nuclear development in countries than we thought we might.
The one country in the Middle East which the world knows to have nuclear weapons is Israel, although it is Israeli policy to deny it.
Clearly, the Israeli nuclear weapons program causes grave concern in the region, and clearly, to some extent, it is a catalyst for other countries to seek nuclear weapons.
Listen to what Saddam Hussein said when we asked him before the war why he felt the need to have nuclear weapons.
Because Israel is in possession of chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons.
The spread of nuclear technology is very difficult to control.
What you're seeing is an emergence of a lot of third world countries that are increasingly able to tap into a very diffuse international technology market and make weapons, even weapons that are prohibited by international embargo.
There is now an international arms embargo against Iraq. In the future, can Saddam Hussein get around it?
I think it's going to be extremely difficult for Saddam Hussein or any successor of his in Baghdad to get hold of large quantities of conventional weapons, particularly aircraft, tanks, and artillery. For that reason, I'm troubled that Iraq will continue to pursue the unconventional weapons route.
The lesson of Iraq seems to be, when it comes to weapons, where there's a will, there's a way. We'll be back in a moment to take a look at American goals and American ideals in Kuwait.
To see the product of a relentless commitment to quality. It started in the 80s and continues to build. Last April, Ford Motor Company unveiled the all-new 92 Mercury Grand Marquis and Ford Crown Victoria. And the innovation continues. In fact, 92 is our biggest new model announcement in years. September 26th at your Ford and Lincoln Mercury dealer. Amazing things happen when you make quality job one.
Minor muscle pain?
When sore, achy muscles keep me from getting a good night's sleep, I reach for relief. I just rub in Aspercream and rub out pain. Fast.
Odor-free, stain-free Aspercream concentrates relief right where you hurt.
The relief lasts for hours, and I don't smell like a medicine chest, so we both get a good night's sleep.
Rub in Aspercream, rub out pain. Fast. Remember, Aspercream contains no aspirin.
This royal throne of kings, this happy breed of men, this earth of majesty, this little world.
The airline that's uniting the world, United, brings you non-stop service from 6 U.S. cities to London's Heathrow and the land of poets.
This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England.
Come fly the friendly skies.
I love being your dog. It's a great life. I get to play with you every day. By the way, that fetch thing, did you come up with that? Genius. But tell me, those new dog biscuits you've been getting instead of Milk-Bone, why? Don't you love me anymore? Maybe you didn't realize it, but Milk-Bone has nearly half the fat of those Purina biscuits. Half the fat. Please, give me back my Milk-Bone.
Premiering Tuesday, September 24th, Homefront. It was one of America's finest hours. The war was over and her boys were coming home.
Charlie has been fighting a war. The least I can do is make an effort on his behalf.
Where innocence ends, the story begins.
Ah, you devil!
Homefront, coming Tuesday, September 24th.
Tonight's ABC News special, A Line in the Sand. What did America win? With Peter Jennings. We'll continue in a moment.
Are you ready to rock? Are you ready to roll? Are you ready for America's #1 primetime football show? We're gonna make you smile and get rid of your blues. The Monday Night Football boogie for you.
That was perfect.
Back in 5, Stephanie?
When you're trying to eat right, days like this are a disaster. Is this it?
Stephanie Powers talks about Kellogg's Nutri-Grain.
The only time I really control what I eat is at breakfast, and the whole grain in Kellogg's Nutri-Grain gives me a natural start. No sugar added, no preservatives, nothing fake. No matter what I eat later, at breakfast I call a shot.
Naturally good. Nutri-Grain, the natural place to start.
Anti-aircraft missiles bought with food stamps? Now it can be told. Food stamp ripoff.
Friday night at 7:30 on Channel 2.
KETU invites you to walk on the wild side Saturday, September 14th and help Washington Park Zoo's Endangered Species Program. Sign up at the usual fitness outlets.
Join Jeff Gianola and Julie Emery tonight on Channel 2 News at 11.
Do you remember when General Schwarzkopf said that while he had won in the contest of arms, he had been somewhat buffaloed over the terms of the ceasefire in the negotiation tent, which led in part to the flight of the Kurds from northern Iraq into Turkey and Iran and caused the U.S. to become involved militarily again. One of the reasons why the polls show a measure of frustration with President Bush's leadership out here, even some months after the war, has to do with a fairly widespread feeling that there is unfinished business. From a lot of people's point of view, there is unfinished business. All the regimes which were intact before the war are still pretty much intact. Saddam Hussein is still in power, still a danger to his own people, and still a danger to his neighbors. There's been no real movement towards democracy in Saudi Arabia as a result of the U.S. presence. And as for Kuwait, suffice it to say that America's influence on behalf of democracy for all Kuwaitis has not been exercised. Kuwait was liberated to protect American interests. There hasn't been much done since to advance American values. Here's ABC's Sheila McVicker.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
2 weeks after the war in the Gulf began, George Bush proclaimed in his State of the Union address the moral imperative for sending U.S. troops into battle.
As Americans, we know that there are times when we must step forward and accept our responsibility to lead the world away from the dark chaos of dictators toward the brighter promise of a better day.
The desert storm has passed. The Arabian desert looks again as it has for centuries. The War of Liberation freed the Kuwaitis from Iraqi occupation, but it did not bring real freedom or democracy to Kuwait. That promise of a better day remains unfulfilled.
Will the peoples of the Middle East accept, as they have in the past, the sorts of regimes they've had? Will the regimes themselves accept to change? Will they be forced to change? Overall, I think we're entering a much more dangerous and uncertain world than was the case, ironically enough, before the invasion of Kuwait last year.
Last October, while in exile in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait's ruling family, the Al-Sabahs, promised that when their country was liberated, they would restore the parliament, freedom of the press, and other rights they suspended in 1986. The emir promised that a liberated Kuwait would be a freer, more democratic nation.
One of the reasons that gave us hope and power to resist the occupation is hoping that the new Kuwait will be something completely different.
In the euphoric days after liberation, Kuwaitis believed the Sabahs' promises would be fulfilled. But when the Sabahs returned from exile, they brought little that was new. They instituted martial law, delayed promised elections, and declined to take responsibility for Kuwait's woeful lack of defense the night Iraq invaded. Many Kuwaitis, like Wafa al-Rashid, have come to doubt the pledges of the Sabahs.
They gave us too much promises, and now they're doing the opposite. They're not giving us anything, not even hope that Kuwait one day will be good to live in.
It was the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that restored the country's basic services. Kuwaitis charged their own government was incompetent. Slowly, the country is being rebuilt, but the economy is still crippled. No one yet knows how much wealth was stripped away. The stock market, the symbol of Kuwait's vibrant pre-war economy, remains stuck in time, exactly as it was when the Iraqis invaded.
We have problems in every department, in every sector, in every corner in Kuwait. And I don't think neither the royal family, neither the government, nor the officials can solve these problems.
Kuwait's horizon is still a hellish specter of oil wells burning out of control. Today, when many Kuwaitis look around them, they do not see a better day on that horizon. The euphoria of liberation has been replaced by resignation, frustration, and vindictiveness. The 7 months of Iraqi occupation traumatized Kuwait and left the nation deeply scarred. Kuwaitis were dragged from their homes to prisons in Iraq where hundreds remain to this day. Others were tortured, raped, murdered. Kuwait's sense of confidence and security was shattered, replaced by a deep distrust of all outsiders. Today, Kuwait's rulers have drawn new lines in the sand, formulated new ways of judging who is friend or foe, who is to be feared, who is to be forced out. The government is even turning against some Kuwaiti residents who tried to defend the country, like Abdul Mohsen al-Fadli, a Kuwaiti policeman taken prisoner by the Iraqis. His wife and 3 children visited him in prison in Iraq, but they have not been permitted by the Kuwaiti government to return home. Instead, they and hundreds of others remain trapped in a desert refugee camp near the Kuwait-Iraq border, even though Abdul Mohsen has been freed and is back in Kuwait.
I never thought I'd be separated from my husband or have to leave Kuwait.
In other places, Abdul Mohsen would be a hero, but his loyalty is now being challenged because Kuwaitis do not consider him one of their own, even though Abdul Mohsen, his father, his wife, and his children were all born in Kuwait. They and thousands like them are labeled under Kuwaiti law as Badoon, stateless, because they do not meet the strict definition of who qualifies as a Kuwaiti.
If I didn't love Kuwait, I would have run away. I wouldn't have put up with the experience of being a prisoner of the Iraqis. I can't stay at home without my family, without my wife, without my children.
We asked a senior Kuwaiti government official about the case of Abdul Mohsen al-Fadli. What do you say to a former Kuwaiti police officer held as a prisoner of war who was born in this country, whose father was born in this country?
What's his grandfather's nationality?
That never mattered before. Now Abdul Mohsen does not know if he will ever be reunited with his family. The service that this young man rendered to his country is of no value. What matters more is where his family comes from.
He didn't work free. He had his salaries, and he has his compensations, and he has a good life. He lived here in Kuwait.
The good life has ended here for thousands of others, including these Palestinian mothers. Each had 2 sons arrested by the Kuwaiti authorities. 3 remain in detention. The 4th, an electrician named Bassem, was killed in Kuwaiti custody the day after he was arrested.
My sons didn't do anything wrong. They were taken away only because they were Palestinians.
Some Kuwaitis have been swift to seek revenge for their trauma against those they accuse of collaborating with the Iraqis. Some Palestinians did collaborate, but because PLO leader Yasser Arafat embraced Saddam Hussein, many Kuwaitis have branded all of Kuwait's 400,000 Palestinians as enemies. Thousands of Palestinians remain in prison without charge. There are confirmed reports of torture. Dozens have been killed. Only a few Kuwaitis have condemned the treatment of the Palestinians.
Yes. The Iraqis, when they came in, they tortured the country, they raped the women. We shouldn't do the same thing like the Iraqis. We were criticizing them then, and we do the same thing now. It's wrong.
Despite Kuwaiti government assurances these abuses have stopped, they have not. And now Kuwait seems to be doing all it can to rid itself of all its Palestinians. Thousands have been ordered fired from their jobs. Their children cannot go to public schools. For tens of thousands of Palestinian families who have been here for generations, there is now no choice but to leave.
Kuwaitis will just tell you, we just don't want them around anymore. That's a very difficult thing, I think, for them to say, but it comes out of this sense of betrayal. And it's an emotion that I think we can understand, may not want to accept, but it's explainable.
The government denies it is punishing the Palestinians. Instead, Kuwait says it has adopted a program it calls demographic restructuring. The stated aim of the policy is to make Kuwaitis the majority in their own country by forcing foreign workers out. There is not a conscious policy on the part of this government to seriously reduce the number of Palestinians resident in this country?
There is a plan to reduce the manpower in Kuwait because we don't want to become the minority, the large minority in our country. And at what time we were.
But new foreign workers arrive every day. They are, of course, not Palestinian. Many are not even Arab. They are Asian. There is doubt that Kuwaitis who relied so heavily on others to run their country can now do it themselves, and doubt that the country will be run much differently than it was before the war. Kuwait was always seen by the rest of the Arab world as arrogant and aloof. It seems now to be embarking on a course that will only ensure renewed enmity and animosity, and could ultimately tarnish what the United States won when it went to war to liberate Kuwait.
It can't, frankly, be seen as a victory, except in a very short-term sense. And the problems that are being created by the war itself will certainly come home to roost. Maybe not for President Bush, but certainly for his successor. And I think that really is perhaps the most damning comment that one can make about the experience of the war in the Gulf last year.
All U.S. troops were scheduled to leave Kuwait this month, but 1,500 remain, ready to come again to the defense of a nation whose values and conduct seem so inconsistent with American ideals.
I don't think that's a completely accurate picture of what Kuwait is. I get asked something a bit more starkly. If you didn't, I will. Was it worth it? Why did we do it? And my answer to that is, what do you mean? How could you possibly say that? This country is free and the people are free. You're going to put a price on freedom?
I don't feel I'm free in my own country. I don't feel I have a democracy. We have nothing. So what? Kuwait is liberated. They should give us the feel of freedom, really.
Today, some Kuwaitis ask why America did not do more, did not insist on real democracy and freedom.
I heard President Bush a couple of weeks ago saying, Mr. Castro, democracy now. Not tomorrow, not after tomorrow, democracy now. Why isn't Bush telling these countries, the Arab world, democracy now? And you have influence now here.
As Americans, we know that there are times when we must step forward and accept our responsibility to lead the world away from the dark chaos of dictators toward the brighter promise of a better day.
In Kuwait, many are still waiting for that day.
One other thing about the immediate future for Kuwait, there does not appear to be the threat of another Iraqi invasion. On the other hand, the Kuwaitis did say the other day that the Iraqis had landed in force here on Bubiyan Island. That may have been a ploy by the ruling family in Kuwait to encourage a long-term American military commitment to Kuwait, which would, of course, give rise to all sorts of Arab nationalist resentment in the region and would definitely anger Iran. There is always something in the region to test America's will. And if you think the future of Kuwait is difficult, we'll be back in a moment with the real state of play between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
If you order a suit designed around the way you're built, you have to wait about 2 months. If you want a house designed around the way you live, the wait is 2 years. But if what you desire is a car designed around the way you drive, you don't have to wait another day. The 1991 Acura Legend Coupe.
Leonard, try making a simple demand. Agnes, Arthur.
Pass the sweet and low?
Oh, very good. Arthur asserted himself.
What's that stuff?
It's the same thing.
It is not. I won't drink my coffee without sweet and low.
Go.
We're colorblind. Watch this. Go. And you're too expensive.
Sweet and low. For millions of people, there's just no equal.
Lucy, are you okay? I think I got whiplash. And a concussion.
Every now and then, life hits you with some very sour notes, and doctor bills can really add up. At MetLife, we do all we can to pay your claim promptly.
Get Met. It pays.
We baked pearls made of denture material in this blueberry pie to prove how powerfully Efferdent, America's leading denture cleanser, removes this tough stain, even in between. Efferdent, stronger than stains.
This itchy rash needs special treatment.
Maximum strength cortisone 5 with the medicine doctors recommend most gets under the itch for soothing relief and help in healing. See, the rash is gone. Use cortisone 5 with the medicine doctors recommend most.
If you drop out of school now, you'll be labeled for the rest of your life.
Snatched from your home, put in a hospital against your will because someone said you did drugs. They did it in Texas and collected the insurance.
They just walk in your house, they take your children, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Primetime investigates tonight.
Now we come to the toughest nut in the forest, a tiny piece of territory compared to everything else on this map. But more emotion has been expended and more blood spilled over this piece of territory than any other on Earth. The Crusaders came all the way from Europe to capture Jerusalem from the Muslims in the 11th century. They were successful in 1099, but they lost it again a couple of centuries later. There were Jews living in Jerusalem 1,000 years before Christ. And there are, of course, the indigenous Palestinians. The argument over this piece of territory is seething with historical precedent, I know. But here are some of the basics, at least as most of us know them. The Israelis and the Palestinians each refer to this as their homeland. The Palestinians, and for that matter the U.S. government, refer to this part here as the West Bank, as in the West Bank of the Jordan River, which flows from here in the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea. I recognize that some of you know most of this by heart. These are the Golan Heights, high over the Galilee, fought over and captured by the Israelis from Syria in the 1967 war. And that coastal strip over there, which is only 140 square miles, is the Gaza Strip. The Egyptians got that from the British in 1949 when all this was Palestine. And it was captured by the Israelis in 1967. All three of these darker areas make up what most of the world regards as occupied territory. In other words, occupied by the Israelis, but not a legal part of the country. Some Israelis, on the other hand, say that this largest dark piece is actually Samaria and Judea. As far as they're concerned, it is all part of Greater Israel, land they were given by God. So what has this got to do with the U.S. victory in the Gulf? Well, the victory in the Gulf established the United States as the dominant power in the region without question. So when the Bush administration decided it was time for the Syrians and the Jordanians and the Egyptians and the Israelis and the Palestinians to sit down and talk together about a permanent peace, everyone was pretty much obliged to say yes, even if they didn't think there was much hope for peace. Here's ABC's John Lawrence.
Tel Aviv, the heart of the Jewish homeland, the area where half the people of Israel live. It is what Israel's enemies see as the soft underbelly of the Jewish state, its most vulnerable point of attack. So, when the wartime duel between American and Iraqi missiles took place over Tel Aviv, some Israelis suffered traumatic shock. In their fear and frustration, Israelis wanted to strike back, but for political reasons they could not. They had to let the United States do the fighting. For the first time in their history, Israelis were forced to put their trust in another country. The experience brought back their worst fears.
People were wondering, have we gone back to Auschwitz, being victims and not reacting? Letting bombs fall on Jews and Jews' homes being destroyed and victims? Back again to the victim. We must, how do we let that psychology surface? That's the deepest terror.
Now, as Israelis try to forget the nightmare of the missiles, they are being asked again to give their trust, as America uses its post-war power to put pressure on Jews and Arabs to make peace. Most Israelis see it as a rare opportunity, but they are also worried. They fear a future that could compromise their security. Some are deeply suspicious.
Do you trust America?
No, not at all. They have isolated us completely, the American administration. And we have the bad luck of having such a hostile administration at a time when America is the sole master of the world, where there is not anymore a bipolar world, not that the Russians were our big friends. But at least as long as there was a competition between the Russians and the Americans in the Middle East, we had some leeway. Now we are cornered.
Cornered, perhaps, but fighting back with bulldozers, cement, and stone. The Israeli government is building Jewish settlements on the West Bank and Gaza at an unprecedented rate. It is in open defiance of protests from Israel's wartime allies, the United States and Europe, and is central to the government's strategy of creating facts on the ground in advance of any peace conference. Leading the Israeli assault is Ariel Sharon, the government's controversial Minister of Housing. While world attention was focused on the war in the Gulf, Sharon almost tripled the number of new Jewish homes being built in the occupied territories this year. The estimated cost, $400 million. Sharon, a former army general who is combative by nature, has a vision of a greater Israel that doesn't have to trust anyone.
Sometimes I'm amazed how many times the Israeli government has to repeat that we don't have any intentions whatsoever to withdraw from Samaria, Judea, Gaza district, of course the Golan Heights. We don't have any intention whatsoever. We are going to stay there forever. We speak about the homeland of the Jewish people.
Sharon's strategy is to build so many houses in the occupied territories that it would be impossible to give up the land in return for a peace treaty. Jonathan Bahar is working on one new house.
We want to put facts on the ground. We want there to be as many Jews living in this area as possible. We figure if you have 250,000 minimum Jews living here, nobody's going to take the land away from us.
There are already 250,000 Jews living in all the occupied territories. Most of them moved here to take advantage of the cheap housing, the good air, and the easy commuting to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Others, like Jackie Bahar, have come for a cause.
I'm doing it for everybody. I'm doing it so one day this place will also be a city. I'm doing it so one day Bush will look around and say, we can't uplift them. Look, there's thousands of them out there. It's going to cost us billions of dollars. Where are we going to put them?
More than half of all the land on the West Bank and Gaza has now been seized by the Israeli army for settlement and defense. 60 miles of new roads have been built already this year, so that Jewish settlers can drive around Arab villages instead of through them. Inside Arab villages, life under occupation is more and more frustrating. It is almost impossible for Palestinians to get building permits to provide new homes for their growing population. When they build homes or dig wells without permission, they are often destroyed by the Israeli army. At the same time, Arabs see Jewish settlements going up on the hills around them. They believe the rapid Israeli expansion is pushing them into a corner. Haj Abu Samed remembers the Jordanian occupation of his village, and before that, the British.
Listen, world. We are fed up with seeking truth and justice. As a matter of fact, we are fed up with this life. We are fed up with living under oppression. Our case is as clear as the sky.
But the Palestinians' case is not getting much sympathy since the Gulf War, when they marched with mock Scud missiles and cheered when real Iraqi missiles crashed on Tel Aviv. Their violent 4-year revolt against occupation, the Intifada, has now claimed more than 1,000 lives, most of them Palestinian, like this 17-year-old shot and killed by Israeli soldiers in a riot. But since the war, more Palestinians have been killed by their own people than by the Israelis in the struggle for political supremacy among themselves. Still, the uprising continues. At Friday prayers, the sermon calls on the young men of this village to stay on the land and resist the Jews. If it takes 1,000 years, the leader says, they will not drive us out. Since the Gulf War, Palestinian dreams of an independent state are in decline. Their relations with the Israelis are worse than ever.
I know that it is not easy to trust your enemy or to like your enemy. From our side, we are not loving the Israelis. We are not like them. We are not even trust them. But we know that there is no way but to live together with them.
But living together in peace does not seem likely.
For you shall pass over the Jordan River to go and to possess the land which the Lord your God gives you, and you shall possess it.
For the smaller number of Jewish settlers like Avram Scheinman, living on remote, isolated hills on the West Bank, the mood has become more warlike. Here, on the front lines of the Arab-Israeli conflict, the settlers' extreme, sometimes arrogant attitudes have hardened since the Gulf War and the revolt of their Arab neighbors.
They call this their land, and we call this our land. Therefore, and they don't accept that, and they have used violent tactics. Therefore, I travel with my gun. The separation between us is the gun which I carry, my Uzi submachine gun, which I carry daily when I travel.
Your average everyday idiot Arab who cannot read or write or know the difference between 10 or 20 or 3, he doesn't see me as an occupier. He doesn't see me as anything. He's out in the fields cutting down his hay with a sickle for 12 hours a day. What does he see from me? He doesn't see anything.
I don't generalize. I don't say the Israelis are a violent, cruel people who kill everybody. I say there is an occupation which is corrupting the occupier and the occupied. I don't give myself the liberty to dehumanize the enemy. If they cannot deal with this in a human and moral way, then it seems to me they have already paid a much heavier price for the occupation than we have.
It is in this volatile mix that the United States government is now immersed, trying to win the peace that followed the war. Some believe it is impossible.
The way I see it is that your president went to war to create a brave new Middle East. And when the war ended, he produced the same old and bad Middle East. And faced with that criticism, he looked around and found the most famous and visible conflict in the world, which is the Israeli-Arab conflict. That is why I think you started the new peace initiative. It has nothing to do with the conditions on the ground. I believe it has only to do with your need to convince your people that there is a new world, that a new world has been created.
I claim that unless America stays and understands how deeply rooted fanaticism and absolute truths govern politics in this world, they will never be able to lead us in a new direction. Bush and Baker have to now study Islamic theology, Christian theology, and Jewish theology before they deal with politics. Because if they just give a practical program, which doesn't solve the foundations of intolerance, they don't have a base for any future realization.
The conflict for control of this land has taken a terrible toll in human lives, misery, and anguish. This American administration may be no more successful in trying to solve the problems than any other. And in the meantime, all the accumulated bitterness will continue to create more victims.
President Bush made it clear today that he is upset with the Israeli government on more than the building of Jewish settlements in the occupied territories. Mr. Bush said the Israeli government is undermining the peace process he has worked so hard at by insisting right now on U.S. guarantees for Israeli loans, which he doesn't want to consider until after an Arab-Israeli peace conference. Trying to make peace in the region is a high-risk enterprise.
Just how realistic is the audio system in the Lexus LS 400?
Did you know that the most valuable patent ever issued went to a small business owner, Alexander Graham Bell? Since then, AT&T has stayed on the cutting edge of communications. For example, AT&T just invented a new 800 service for small businesses. It uses your existing line and costs only $6 a month. At AT&T, almost half our business comes from small business. When you succeed, we succeed. Call about our 800 offer.
Look what's popping up, that's free. Special K waffles from Eggo. Once you see how good fat free can be, oh no, you never let go.
No way. It's all mine.
Special K waffles from Eggo.
Eggo Special K waffles. Crisp, delicious, yet every bite fat-free, cholesterol-free, and just 80 calories per waffle. See how good fat-free can be.
Oh no, you never let go. Nah. Special K waffles from Eggo.
Because there's a man planning his retirement. Because there's a family hoping to send their kids to college. Because every investor is different, with dreams all their own. Dean Witter measures success one investor at a time.
Pain from just one sensitive tooth can start the domino effect. Pain can make you stop brushing, lead to plaque buildup, gingivitis, periodontal disease, even tooth loss. Sensodyne toothpaste helps stop the pain and the domino effect.
On every side of the Middle East equation, there are people who differ with the points of view you've heard here. There are Israelis who think land should be traded for peace, as much as half the population in some polls. There are Palestinians who wish to compromise and Palestinians who do not. The Bush administration believes that its efforts to put together a peace conference between Arabs and Israelis, which it hopes will be held next month, is going to be a landmark event in the Middle East. We'll see what happens. But time has a way of eroding will in the Middle East, and cynicism in the region is like a second skin, as we have learned in almost every country. In Iran, especially during the 70s and 80s, and in Kuwait and Iraq in the last year, events have a way of spinning out of control. So what did America win? For the Bush administration, in search of a new world order, it was never a case of just winning on the battlefield, but the greater challenge which still exists of winning the peace, so that American forces in large number do not have to return. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.